G'day gamers, I'm Writ and this is Subsistence. Subsistence is a survival game currently in early access on Steam from indie developer Cold Games. The main attraction of this particular survival game is not so much what it does feature, but what it does not. Zombies. As a matter of fact, the game does not feature any supernatural, fantasy, or even apocalyptic elements. Instead, it is focused on pure survival, man versus nature, with a few competing adversaries thrown in for good measure. The game starts with the player dropped into a harsh wilderness, teeming with wild beasts all around. An encounter with the wildlife at this early stage, with little in the way of equipment and less in the way of preparation, will almost certainly result in a swift death. If you do manage to avoid such incidents for long enough to travel any great distance, it will soon become clear that you are trapped, fenced within this hazardous landscape with no means of escape. Why and by whom you have been imprisoned is not known, but one thing which does soon become clear, you are not alone. And I'm not just talking about the animals. Other people eventually start to appear, but don't think that they are there to help you. This is quickly made clear by the volley of small arms fire that tend to discharge in your direction at every opportunity. And so, trapped, hunted, cold and hungry, you must find a way to survive against all odds and become the master of your environment. To begin with, you have a few basic supplies, such as an axe to collect wood and a pistol, but your best bet is to slowly make your way around the environment, avoiding confrontation at all costs. If you are sensed by a predator, there is usually only one thing to do. Run. Run and don't look back. Don't stop until you are absolutely positive the beast has given up the chase, or you collapse in sheer exhaustion. As you creep around, collect everything you can find. Plant fibres, berries, scrap iron, and particularly supply chests and bags, which are scattered randomly around the area and may contain vitally important items to help you survive, such as water bottles, nails, and the all-important ammunition. With enough ammunition collected for your pistol, if you are brave or desperate enough, you can try to take down a wolf for some nutritious meat, vital for keeping your energy levels up. Whenever it's safe to do so, you should also use your axe on the trees around you to collect wood for various crafting recipes and to use as fuel for a campfire, a necessity if you are to survive the cold nights. With the basics sorted, it is time you started thinking about a more permanent camp. After all, you may be here for quite a while, if you're lucky enough to survive, that is. Pick a good spot, near some easily recognisable landmarks, and place a wood foundation, preferably off the ground, away from roaming predators, and you can then start adding to your base. A storage chest to save your valuable items, the all-important campfire to keep you warm at night, and some walls and a ceiling, just for that homey feel. From there you can move on to more advanced crafting with a base command unit, which marks the current structure as your base, and opens up new building options. Other features to help you survive include growing plants for food and materials, farming animals, gathering ore to be broken down for further crafting, and expanding your base with new functionality. Death in this game is something which you may experience all too frequently, whether it is due to animal attack, enemy encounters, cold weather, or hunger. Death always seems just around the corner. When the inevitable does occur, you will be respawned at a random location across the map, with only the very basic starter supplies in your inventory. You then must use your knowledge of the environment to try to find your way back to your corpse, in order to retrieve your dropped items before they disappear. There is no HUD pointer or compass or even a map. Your only aid to navigation is the sun and your own awareness of landmarks. Once you've marked a structure as your base with a BCU, this will provide a beacon to guide you home, but only after a short time delay. This blind navigation is made even more difficult by the onset of nightfall. Night in Subsistence is not your typical moody atmosphere night, as seen in most games or movies for that matter, but a near pitch black, can't see your hand in front of your face kind of night. With this in mind, you are provided with a simple glow stick as part of the basic starter supplies, which adds an eerie fluorescent blue tint to your surroundings. This may be enough to stop you running at full tilt into a stone monolith, and may even help identify threats at the last moment. But short of randomly tripping over one, it's not going to help you spot navigation landmarks. Fortunately, the environment has been crafted with just enough unique elements that it will not take long for all but the most unobservant survivor to start recognising landmarks which can be used for navigation. A nearby mountain also helps to provide a reference point visible from almost anywhere in the enclosure. This makes navigating much less of a chore as time goes on, with the obvious exception that night brings, when it is probably best to just set up a campfire where you are and wait for dawn. Night also brings with it another danger, that of the cold. As previously mentioned, a campfire is a vital piece of kit, necessary to fight off hypothermia, which will begin to affect you almost the moment the sun dips below the horizon. You can craft additional clothing, which should reduce the effects of cold on your player, but obtaining the required material to do this may take quite a while. Another option for the more daring adventurer is to try launching an attack on one of the hostile NPC hunter parties. These guys seem to have better equipment than the player, and if you are successful, you could be rewarded with a nice warm jacket to fend off the cold night. The NPC hunters only start to appear in the game a few days after your base has been designated by crafting a BCU. This at least gives you a little time to build up the basic necessities of survival, before the added danger of the hunters is presented. They will begin by building a base of their own, which will slowly build up over time. The hunters will wander from their home base, attacking the player on sight if spotted. Killing hunters can be, as you expect, a real challenge for an ill-equipped player, but the rewards can be substantial. Not only can you loot the body of the hunter, you can also raid their camp for further supplies. Hunting wild beasts is another dangerous task, but vital if you are to survive for long. Although plants can keep you alive, they don't provide the protein required to maintain energy. Without energy, the player can no longer run, making them the proverbial sitting duck to any beasts or hunters which happen to cross their path. Hunting is best carried out with a definitive plan in place. Take only what you need for the hunt so that you don't lose too much should things go awry. Pick a target in a location where you can use the environment to your advantage rather than the first beast you come across. Attacking from the vantage point of a tall rock may give you enough time to get off the required rounds before the animal is able to reach you. Just be sure you can escape if they get too close. Develop an effective weapon strategy in order to effectively kill your prey, using the fewest possible resources. Maybe use the pistol to get a few shots into them at a distance, then quickly switch to the shotgun when they get closer, maximising the effectiveness of both weapons. If you run out of ammunition, your only choices are to hightail it out of there or start swinging your axe and hope for a miracle. An alternative to hunting is to try catching small game animals such as chicken and rabbits. These can be collected with a key press if you happen to get close enough to one. Once collected, the animal can be harvested for a small amount of resources immediately or reared in a pen until they grow into a more substantial meal. Keeping animals costs food and water in itself, so the benefits versus the cost need to be weighed up before making a decision. Either way, you will rarely get enough nutrition from just game animals, making hunting essential at times, though you can drastically reduce the frequency of these dangerous hunts by supplementing some small animals in your diet. Growing crops is another reliable source of food. Seeds can occasionally be found in the environment and planted at your base. Similarly to keeping game animals, growing crops requires water and food in the form of ash, which acts as a fertilizer. So again, you should decide if you can afford the resources. Initially found in the random cases lying around the environment, water bottles are vital to survival, not only to hydrate yourself but also to grow crops and feed any kept animals. Crafting in the game evolves from simple campfires using the wood sourced from trees, through to base building, which uses a predefined asset style, with each element of the structure, such as a foundation, a wall, or a ceiling, crafted individually, then snapped together to construct a building of your own design. With the addition of BCU, further advanced items can be crafted, such as a wood stove to replace the campfire, generators to supply additional power, animal pens and plant boxes to source food, refrigerators to prevent food from spoiling, or refinery to break down raw materials into usable components, weapon benches, and many more too numerous to mention. So what are my thoughts on the game in its present state? It's definitely not a game for everyone, even those who like survival games. This is a game of patience and perseverance above all else, where action usually only occurs due to desperation. This is also something of a management game at its heart, with plenty of strategy elements thrown in. How you use your resources and planning ahead are both vital to success. The game is far from perfect, as is to be expected in any game so early in development. The difficulty at present can be frustrating simply because it seems to be artificially made this way, without the feeling of natural or organic difficulty. There are times when it is obvious that the environment is so harsh because it has been programmed that way. This comes down to the balancing, which needs quite a bit of modification in the future, not necessarily to make the game easier, but to make the difficulty seem more realistic. I will give some examples of current balancing issues and what I believe is needed in the next section. There are surprisingly few natural resources in the current game. Water all comes in the form of bottles, either found in random packs or sourced from the craftable well. There does not appear to be any bodies of water, such as ponds or rivers. There are currently only a few animals, though they do vary in level, which can alter the threat they pose or the resources you can harvest from them. The few plants you can harvest in the wild are difficult to spot, which isn't such a bad thing, but they can also be hard to identify. I still can't tell the difference between plant fibres and berries, which you would think would be fairly obvious. The game features no means of navigation beyond landmarks and memory until you have established a base. This is not necessarily a bad thing. Having to learn your environment makes it seem more natural. In fact, if anything, I think the magically appearing base beacon takes away from that organic feel somewhat. Currently the game is single player only. This, in my opinion, isn't a bad thing. There are a plethora of open world survival games out there where you can hop online and fulfill all your masochistic desires of being robbed and humiliated, or just shot on sight by some 12-year-old Russian kid screaming insults and cackling away from their shoddy microphone. The threat posed by the environment, the animals and the NPC hunters can, if balanced correctly, make for a more enjoyable gaming experience. The game itself seems very stable, at least in the 8 hours or so I have played. There have been no crashes or anything really odd. Game performance is adequate and comparable to similar games. I did not encounter any unexpected or random slowdowns, which are a common feature of so many early access games. There are plenty of graphical options in the game menu and more in the setup files if you feel the need to squeeze every possible frame out of your system. The visuals range from mediocre character and animal models to quite spectacular and atmospheric environments, particularly at dawn and dusk. The sunlight streaming through the trees is worth taking a moment to admire, as long as you're not being chased by an angry bear at the time. Sound too was adequate, but nothing which really stood out for me. The in-game interface is minimalist, providing the basic information about your player, with extra information as required, such as when you are hungry or bleeding. The menu system, both at the front end and in-game, could use some work. The load game menu in particular has an odd layout to it, where I have to double check what I'm clicking for fear that I'm about to overwrite a save game. I have occasionally dropped items from my inventory when moving them around because the game seems to forget that I'm holding the mouse button, but I can't be sure that this is not a problem with my setup. And the items fortunately drop to the ground in an easily visible box, so retrieving them is not much of a problem. In its current state, the game is one which can be enjoyed immensely. There is a genuine feeling of satisfaction when you manage to successfully execute a hunting expedition, or alternatively, escape from a pack of wild animals hot on your tail. Survival is difficult but rewarding. There are the aforementioned moments of frustration where things just seem either unfair or, even worse in my opinion, unrealistic. This isn't a deal breaker so long as you go in with the right mindset. That is, one of patience, planning and understanding that you could die at any moment. If you can accept this, then you may find something uniquely satisfying in Subsistence, as I have done. So what do I believe the game needs, specifically, moving forward? Balancing is the key in my opinion. As development progresses and features are added, balance will be continuously altered, so the developer is doing their best to provide some artificial balancing as this goes on. As the feature list is nearing completion, I hope to see the balance become more natural and realistic. Some of the balance issues I see at the moment, which I hope will be addressed in future releases, include making the animals slightly easier to kill. Having to put a full clip of pistol rounds into a bear and still being killed is almost believable, but 5 or 6 rounds into a wolf, or even worse, a couple of bullets to kill a chicken, make the difficulty seem artificial and takes away from the immersion. Reducing how quickly a player is killed by hypothermia. Dying from the cold within a few minutes of respawning away from your base, before having any chance of getting back, is both unrealistic and needlessly frustrating. Increasing the availability of simple foods such as berries, and increasing the time it takes for the player to die from hunger. I like the current system of player energy being depleted by malnutrition, but death from hunger takes many days or even weeks in real life. Have the NPC hunters vulnerable to animal attacks as well. It seems both unrealistic and frustratingly unfair when you spy hunters from a distance and watch as bears and wolves walk around them as though they are invisible. I'm hoping that some of these issues will be ironed out with the introduction of new features, such as primitive weapons, which would allow the animal toughness to be toned down by removing the need for the current artificial difficulty to match the firearms. In terms of features, all that is really needed in my humble opinion is variety. More animals, more plants, possibly more building options. The complexity of design being seen in other games such as 7 Days to Die is not needed here, and could even work against the title. Stick to nature, but make it natural. These hopes I have for the future of the game, as selfish as they may be, are with the intention of seeing a game which can be played fairly in a permadeath fashion, by tweaking down the difficulty to a more organic level whilst increasing the penalty for actually dying. There is the possibility of this game being the go-to for those seeking something truly immersive. In conclusion, I hold a genuine belief in the future of this title, not because of some unrealistic expectation of the noble one-man development team, but because of the record of updating and community interaction already demonstrated. I really don't know what the final outcome of this game's development will be, but I am confident that the game will at least have an outcome, which is more than can be said for many early access releases. The game is at present a flawed diamond, a little rough around the edges, but unique and rewarding enough to keep the patient player coming back consistently. There are not many titles I would take so much time to address, but my experience with this game, even in its currently primitive and at times frustrating state, is one that I feel warrants the attention. So if you are looking for a new and fairly unique survival experience without the zombies, and bearing all the quirks I have mentioned in mind, I highly recommend giving Subsistence a look. Be sure to check out my upcoming gameplay videos to get more of an idea of the game and maybe a few tips on how to survive. I'll also try to update this video as and when major features are introduced. Thanks for watching.